talk about today is DaVinci Resolve 16.2, which came out just a month ago, but it was really packed with all kinds of awesome features. Yes, it had a few cool things for color and edit, but this particular rev of DaVinci Resolve was really focused on packing in a lot of audio features. And they're based on requests from audio editors and audio mixers and people who have had their long list of requests of, we'd love it if you only could do this. And so we've added a whole lot of this to DaVinci Resolve 16.2. So I'm going to show you some of those things. And one of the first ones I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to jump out my interface for a second, so hang on. And just go to open up our Fairlight sound library. Now, I know you heard about this when we first made our announcement about DaVinci Resolve 16. Well, here it is. You have 16.2. You can download it right from our, oh great, my internet connection is unstable. So are you guys able to see me though and hear me still? Okay, great. So I'm going to glance at Bob from time to time to see what kind of, see what he's showing me. All right, so anyways, once you download, and you can get that right from our support page on our website. In the downloads, you'll find it, and then you can double click and install. Once you have installed that on your system, it's going to show up over here in your sound library. Now, the sound library, you can bring in any of your sound effects. You can import them, and all what it does is it indexes them, allows you to search for them, use it for any of your databases. As you can see right there is my Fairlight sound library already there. There's over 500 sound effects, and these are Foley effects to use to kind of beef up your soundtracks. And a lot of people, one of the most common questions I get is, how do I see them? I want to see the list. Well, the secret, don't tell anyone. The secret is to use 3 asterisks. So type 3 asterisks in the search field. And yes, that's my dog. I have 2 people on dog duty today to make sure she doesn't do exactly that. So, of course. Anyway, this is not a sound effect. But what I've done is I typed in the 3 asterisks. And now you can see from A to Z all of our different Foley effects. Things like ants scurrying. That sounds like fun. Let's listen. Can you guys hear ants scurrying? Oh, good. I can't, but I believe you. I'm going to go down and scrub down a little bit. We have things like golf bags and laptop typing. And if I go all the way down to the Z's, and there is a Zippo lighter because, you know, you never know when you need a Zippo lighter. There it was with the little flick and the ignite, which is nice. I would like to move these little images. There we go. I have my sound dimmed right now, so that's going to make it a little bit lower. So now we can hear them a little bit better. Zippo lighter, take 2. I think you all heard it that time, yes? So I'm going to show you a couple other things real quick. I'm going to clear this out. Now that was just searching using the asterisks to see the entire thing. But notice one of the improvements we have in the top left is I can search all fields, but now both the name and the metadata can be searched. And what that does for us is, in case you don't know the name, I mean, who's going to memorize all their sound effects? You can also search by descriptor. So for example, if I type something like money, anything that happens to do with money, like handling stacks of money, is going to show up, or if it's in the metadata. In this case, let me try something like boots, and as you can see, anything with boots in the name is going to show up. Walking sound effects on different surfaces. And then there's also ones where it's only in the metadata. For example, this one right here, running boots, concrete, FS for footsteps and away, meaning they're running far away. And sure enough, it just ran away, right? So hopefully you guys could hear that. So those are our sound effects. Those are the Foley effects, which can be used to edit directly into the timeline. And you can also use those for, those can also be used with our Foley sampler, so that's really cool. Now, that was only the sound library. We have a lot more here. Let's go over to the index. I'm going to fit everything to the window. Now, our index has been improved. Now, the index is where you can see your markers. We now have added an edit index, and we also have the ability to swipe and move things around. So, for example, if you have a track and you want to just drag it up to another space, you could just do that. You can also rename the tracks. You can color them. You can swipe on your mutes. Right here, rename, I'm swiping on my solo. I can change the color, for example. And to move them, you just click and drag. By the way, if you go to automation, it also will bring up your other tracks, and you can now also swipe on or click on your automation right here in the index. So it's become a really powerful tool. I'm going to move from the index over to let's go to the media pool for a minute, because something else that we can do that's super exciting. I'm going to hide my index, and I'm going to show my master bin list for a second to bring up some effects. Hide that again, is we've made it even easier to bring in multiple clips, different formats, it doesn't matter. In the past, obviously you can drag and drop individual clips, but right here I'm going to bring in 3 individual clips, drag them to the timeline, any empty space. If I let go, I now have 3 new clips matching. They're all stereo in this case, so they're all went into one track. But what's new is if you hold the command key and drag to the timeline and release, you now get an option, drag on media, which will extend your track count. It'll add new tracks, say yes, now I have 3 new stereo tracks. So if you have a whole lot of clips that you know you want to dump in on different tracks, this is a really easy way to do it. Now I'm going to also show this one more time, because here I have stereo, mono, and I have a 6-channel 5.1 clip, and if I drag all of those to the timeline, if I just release, they're going to all go into a track that's going to be the highest track count for whichever clips I have. In this case, I hold down the command key and release, and it's going to give me, let me try that one more time. Click yes, and now I have 3 different tracks. One of them is going to be my 5.1, here's my mono, and here's my stereo tracks. So very, very useful that you can do that right here. And it's just a command drag. Super simple to work on that. Let's jump over one more thing over here on the left. I'm going to bring up my effects library, and I'm going to hide my media pool. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that share the left side of the screen, but these are a big deal for those of you who work with this, depending on what workflows you use. And so here in the effects library, our Fairlight effects, these all come with DaVinci Resolve, and in 16 we have almost 24 effects. They work on Mac, Windows, and Linux platforms. And the 2 new ones that are pretty cool right here, one of them is a Lfe Filter, and I'm just going to drop that onto my drone track. And when I do that, what you're going to get is a specialized low pass filter. So if you're working in surround, if you're working with your Lfe effects, you can kind of roll off that high end frequencies. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what is an Lfe, that's low frequency effect, or that's the stuff that goes to the subwoofer to really rattle your rib cages and shake the windows and make the neighbors tell you to turn it down. So that's what this particular filter is. And the other plugin that I really love, and this is brand new, it's practical, but it's also super cool. By the way, let me put my playhead here so we have an image, is I'm going to bring up my meter, and I'm just going to drag it onto one of my dialogue tracks. So I just put it onto this Emiliana track. And what this gives us is a floating meter. I'm going to bring up my mixer so we can see that we have lots of different parts to the interface. Obviously, we are not short on meters. If I play, I have my sound dimmed, by the way, just so you don't have to hear too much right now. But you can see all of these different meters are flying at any time, right? But I now have a floating meter that I can use as well. I'm going to make it a little bit taller. And what's great about this is it's a peak meter and an RMS meter, so that I can really see. I'm going to start back here again, and if you look, I can see exactly what my peaks is. It gives me a number, and it gives me a scale that I can see. And when this comes in really handy, it's not when I have all my other meters, it's when I maybe pop this out and I want to hide my meters in my mixer, and then all of a sudden I have just this one little meter. In fact, why have one meter when you can have lots, right? I think I will pull this out. I happen to have meters on 2 other tracks as well. So let me bring those out. And as you can see, it doesn't take long to be able to have all of those running at once, so I can monitor things while I'm listening or watching with other people. I can really focus on my buses or my different tracks with just these meters, and they are very easy to see. So that's really a cool feature that we have, and a new plugin that, like I said, use at will for whatever you need it on. I'm going to close this up, open up my mixer again. And one other thing I want to point out with our effects is we've also categorized them, because yes, we have almost 24 effects that come with Resolve, but there's also a lot of people have maybe hundreds or thousands of effects. And so one of the things we've done is if you're adding them over in the mixer, I'm over in the mixer now, if you click on this plus right here, this is where you can add effects. They have now been categorized. So whether you have thousands that you have to search through or just the ones that come with it, they have now been sorted by category. And you notice I have 2 at the top, meter and reverb, because those are my favorites. Not really, they're all my favorites, but those are my favorites for this demo. And if you look down here, you'll see my favorites are listed. How do you get something into favorites? You just click right next to it. Let's give ourselves one more. How about my de-hummer? So there we have one more favorite. And if I come back over to my mixer, you'll see now I have that one on here as well. So that's just little bonus things. For people who are using this all the time, long form projects, it's really nice to have those kind of features that you can kind of turn on and off at will. So enough about those things. Now for the big enchilada, right? This is one of the huge things that everybody was hoping for, or a lot of the editors, the ones who are in there cutting all the time, editing, moving really, really fast when they're working on whether it's dialogue editing or sound effects editing or something else. They needed a new tool. They needed something that they could use for getting in there and working faster with keyboard shortcuts and with the mouse. And so what we've done is we've added an entirely new tool. And I think to make this tool really shine, I'm going to just go to a different timeline here. Very similar. I'll bring up my meters so you can see them. Hide my mixer for a minute. And so here we are in a different version of the same timeline we had before. And what I want to show you is how this tool works. And what they call it is edit selection mode. And what is edit selection mode? Well, it's a mode that combines the functionality of our pointer tool and our range selection tool, but what it really does is it unlocks dozens of features that used to only be available in the Fairlight audio editor in our full-size consoles. And so there's people like, hey, I want buttons, I want to be able to do that as really, really fast, and now you can. You just come in here and turn on this tool. Now, once I've turned this on, you're like, well, nothing looks very different. But it is, and I'm going to show you that right now. One of the first things you'll notice with the edit selection mode is if I click anywhere in my timeline, instead of a full playhead, I only get this one little mark here, and that is going to be an edit point. If I start playback, it starts from that point. So wherever I click on any track, it starts a little edit selection, which lets you hop around wherever you need to go when you need to go there, which is pretty cool. What else is good about it is if I click there and I zoom in with a shortcut, it lets me zoom in to whatever place I'm interested in, not necessarily where the playhead is. If you're using any of our other tools, all the zooming, horizontal zooming is based on playhead position. I'm going to bring over this clip. I'm going to change that color. That's fairly horrific. Let's go navy on this one. And I'm going to zoom in on this track just a little bit so you can see it better. Can you all see that now? Hopefully. When I go with my edit selection tool, it's going to change based on where I click. Now, it works a little bit differently. Once we get the playhead moving, you can actually do all this while the playhead's moving, so it's completely uncoupled from the playhead. In this case, I'm just going to show you what you can do when the playhead is not moving. Already showed you, there's my playback. I can click anywhere and I can start playing. If I click and drag, it creates a range, which I can then loop around if I wanted to. Put on my loop playback, and I could loop through that section very easily. If I click off of it, it's going to deselect it. Now, if you notice, it gives me a crosshair. That's like our range selection tool. I can also still adjust the volume. I can still add keyframes, option click to edit and change my curve right there if I want to. I can still add fades by dragging. I can trim. If I trim the edge, I can fade. So all of those things and functionality that you used to be able to do, of course you can. Where this gets really cool is click the top half of your clip and you get the edit selection. Click the bottom half and you get a hand. Notice it changes as you pass the equator there and go into the lower half, and now all of a sudden I can move the clip without actually changing an edit point. So it's great for repositioning things and that sort of stuff. Now, when I said it unlocks some tools, let me show you where those are. If you right-click anywhere on a clip, you are now going to see a new set of tools. There are 4 new menus on your right-click menus, and these are based, the first 3 are based on edit selection, and the last ones are going to be based on track selection, and it's scalable waveform zoom. Let's start with the edit selection. If you look right here, let me just click a point, just drag a little edit selection so we have something to look at. If I come down here and say edit selection, it's going to let me move to a previous to the previous edit if I do that. So it allows you to quickly move your edits around, your selections around as needed. And you can also extend it. I'm going to come down here or move it to the previous track, for example. Now let's move it a track up. I can come back down and just move it to the next track and it's back here. Notice it's now on 2 different tracks. So little things like that I can do. You can also, if you right click, go down here and you can extend the selection. So you can make it wider. You can move it from clip to clip down selected tracks. Whatever it is you need to do, you can hop around really fast with the keyboard and not necessarily grabbing your mouse. Going down to edit selection editing, I can take this little section that I've trimmed and I can trim it by just going down there to the menu and trimming it. Now, I have one problem with right-clicking on a menu. There are a few things slower in a workflow than dragging yourself, right-clicking and digging through a menu, right, and a sub-menu from that. It's like using a menu to use the brakes in your car while driving on the highway. Who's going to do that, right? So we need shortcuts for some of this stuff, and I'm just going to show you where we can do that. I'm going to come over here to the keyboard customization. And we updated this in DaVinci Resolve 16, made it really powerful and easy to use. And we can now have shortcuts based on the pages that we're working on. So in this case, I left the default. I'm going to go over here to the default DaVinci Resolve, and I can come down to like Fairlight Timeline and look for things that are specific to the Fairlight Timeline. And you notice there's quite a few things available, but none of them have keystrokes. So that's up to me to add those. So depending on what software you're used to, where's your muscle memory, what it is you're used to doing, you can make these yourself. I'm just going to show you. There's also shortcuts already built in for some of the editing software. Now, the Logic Pro I put in there myself. Here's a Pro Tools set that I've just thrown in here. And again, just depends on what I'm working on, just showing you how quickly you can populate these to whatever shortcuts you're already accustomed to. I'm going to use one that's mine that I created for this demo. And then I've added some of the shortcuts that I can use for whatever. And in fact, let's just discard that. I'm not going to change anything. And so all I can show you is with a shortcut, just by dragging that little range, I can now trim off the heads and tails of my range. I can do them both at the same time with a shortcut really fast. And I can also add fades to those. There's my heads and there's my tail. So I can do all that super fast while I'm working. And I can even do that during playback. So one other thing, like I said, it's just about trying to figure out how you want to use these tools and how fast you can work. Those of you who are already really quick in a timeline, for editing, you already know how to apply these tools. And for those of you who've never tried this, I say dive in. The only way you're going to get good at anything is to use it, right? So for example, over here, if I want to use my edit selection tool to kind of lop off the end, this red marker happens to be my last frame. If I click over there, I haven't selected everything, just one track, right? But if I shift click anywhere below that, notice it extended that range, and now I can just lop all this off and make it nice and clean. So little things like that, super easy to do. Other features that we added in here just to make it super easy is, for example, I can now option drag, which we've never been able to do it. You've never been able to option drag clips to duplicate them for audio on the Fairlight page. We finally can do that here. The other thing we can do is you can also make a shortcut that you can, option D is what I've added in here, so I can paste it one on top of the other really fast with shortcuts, which is awesome. So last thing I'm going to show you on this, because I know it's way more exciting maybe to me than some of you, but I'm going to go to a little bit more complicated timeline, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of this in action. Again, I'm going to leave my sound dimmed so it's not too loud. But as you can see, this is a scene. And what's cool about this is during playback, I can do all kinds of maneuvers while it's playing without ever interrupting playback. So if you have a client sitting there and they have some comment like, how come the drone left off? Or how come it's doing that? Or why'd you do this? And can you adjust that? Or sometimes you see something up ahead in the timeline. You're like, oh crap, I forgot to do that. I'm sure that never happens to you. But you might see something you need to fix. Well, you can do it during playback as long as you're using this tool. So for example, I'm just going to start playback about here. I'm just going to hit the space bar and start. And while it's playing, I'm going to go ahead and I want to move this over. I'm going to grab a selection of this. I want to duplicate it quickly. Did you notice I did that under the playhead while it's playing back? So I was able to build up a little track there. And by the way, I want to zoom in over here. I see something that might need a little tweaking. I can zoom in on that during playback, go in and adjust the level. I can add keyframes. I can add a fade. I can do whatever I need to, zoom back out. And I never stopped anything. I'm just doing my work. I'm even going to do that trick I just showed you and trim off the end of my timeline and make it nice and neat before my play had ever got there. And the client may know what I'm doing and they may not. Okay, so this is the edit selection tool. Please try it out. It is super cool. I know I'm a little geeky about stuff like that, but really it is super cool. So again, edit selection mode, all you do is come into here to turn that on. A couple other really fast things. If it's possible for me to do something really fast, I shall. Hopefully everyone's still awake, still with me. Thumbs up. Yeah, still here? Okay, great. Let's go. A couple other teeny tiny little things that are huge in the big world. One of those, and I'll just go to a different timeline for that, is, again, we got lots of requests for this one. Where is my timeline? Is the ability to, we can bounce tracks and we can bounce things all over the place. I'm going to undim this for a second and bring up my inspector. Is one of the things that people want to do is you also want to be able to take a clip right out of the timeline and save it as a new file that you tag it, and it has all of its effects applied that you can use for things. And so we've actually added that right here. And if I play this back, you hear that? It's a nice little computer whir sound. And that's pretty exciting stuff, right? But I just created that here in Fairlight, and I need it because I'm doing a sci-fi show, and I need it as this talking computers background. And if you notice, what's cool about this is all it really is, I've added a little pitch, some EQ, and a flanger. It's really just noise. I just recorded some noise from our oscillator, built an oscillator, and added a few enhancements. And with those, I now have this effect. So I want to create this and save it. And so if I right click and just go right here in our bounce category, we can cache things, we can bounce in audio effects, and in this case, bounce the clip to file, and it gives me a new window where I can save this. This is great if you've done a lot of work with processing on audio, if you put together music tracks or stems, whatever it is that you need to get out into your Finder level and move it somewhere else, you can do it right here. I'm going to browse to some wonderful place like, oh, I don't know, the desktop, and don't ever save to the desktop. I'm kidding. Here we go. I'm going to tag it, and I'm just going to put computer warble as the tag, and then it'll have the clip name as well. You can also change the format. It could be mono files, so it'll come out as split mono, or I can do it as multi-channel and bounce. That's it. And theoretically, it lives right here. It is on my computer now. So easy peasy, right? That's super cool. And then one other thing, or I got two other things, actually. They'll be fast, though. I'm going to go to the edit page for this one. One of the most common effects one of the most common requests I get is people need to be able to access their different channels. So let's say you have a clip that someone gave you and it has 7 channels of audio, or it has 6 channels of audio, and you want to isolate one or get rid of one or change one, or you're bringing things in with multiple channels. We've now made that easier than ever. I'm just going to right click on this clip and make a new timeline based on the clip. So you can see there's nothing happening under the hood other than the fact the clip is orange. That's pretty bad, but okay. So we have this orange clip, and what you can see is it is a 5.1 clip, and I know that because it shows me 5.1, but the edit page doesn't always reveal that much. If I go to the Fairlight page, there it is, and you can see that I can tell that it is indeed, I've got to get rid of that color. Sorry. You can tell, maybe not, that you can see that it is indeed a 5.1 clip. Now what we can do here is we're able to now go in and we can access these individual channels, because right now if I adjust the volume on one, I'm getting all at once. And again, you have this clip and you just want to mute the dialogue channel, for example, or let's say you want to only hear the dialogue channel to do some looping or something. Well, the way we do that, super easy, just right click on the track header and say convert to linked group. And right there we just got, there's my 6. Each one is linked. If I look at my mixer here, you'll see that right now I have 1 channel in here. It's a single fader for all of those. There's my panner, and you can see that it has my 5.1 surround, and they are all labeled as such. But I do have individual abilities to go in and adjust the volume on those, or I could even delete one if I wanted to, not that you want to do that, or mute it. That's great. Now, if I want to take this one step further, you go up to the Fairlight menu and go to Link Group and just select that and unlink it. And when I click Unlink, of course, now instead of having all of those linked together, I have individual clips, and each one is discrete. and they do retain the panning that they had prior, but now I can get in there and say, hey, I only want this channel, or I want to get rid of this, and I have complete independent control because they're all now separate. We could not do that easily before. We had to go in there and work at it in the media pool, but you can do it here. And because this is Fairlight and our Fairlight's channel mapping is super awesome, I'm just going to show you that even though I've deleted all those channels and all I have is my left channel, if you ever want to put it back, we don't delete any of the channels that are on a clip. So all you do, right click, I can go to my clip attributes and I can say, hey, instead of mono, please go back to my 5.1. There's all the channels I had originally. Now I'm still on a mono track, but I can just change the track type really fast to 5.1. And I now have exactly what I started with originally. So you can totally round trip those any direction you need to super fast. Do I have time for one more thing? One more? Okay. So I have something else I wanted to show for editors, and I think this is kind of important. So let's back into, let me go to this particular timeline. No, I'll go to the first one. All right, so I'm at a timeline. So one of the things that comes up is if you are going out to an AAF or an EDL, let's say you happen to be going to another application. Now with DaVinci Resolve, you don't have to. You can do your entire post-production right here. Bring it in from the cameras, do your editing, your color correction, your motion graphics and visual effects. You can do all of your audio and you can output it right from here. However, if you happen to be going somewhere else for any reason, one of the things that comes up with audio specifically is if I zoom in, is you have the ability to edit at the subframe level. So let me get in here and zoom in. Subframe and even the sample level. I can get all the way down in there to the samples. So I can make some very fine-tuned editing. The problem is when you go to make an AAF or you're going to another application, they like frames, right? Especially if you're working with video, people seem to like frames and sync, for example. So I'm going to jump over here and I'm just showing you that I cannot necessarily be on a frame boundary. If you look up here in my time code, I am not on a frame boundary at all for this particular sound, even though that's the sync sound that goes to the video clips. So, and by the way, I can even show my video tracks right here if I needed to see those, and I've got my video tracks showing now. So if I jump to the edit page, you can also see that I might have, even if I zoom in, at some point you're going to be able to see that I don't have, I'm off my frame boundaries here as well. So how do we fix that? Well, you can do it one of two ways. If I'm on the edit page, I have the option to just choose in the timeline menu. There's now something brand new right here, trim audio edits to frame boundaries. Brand new to DaVinci Resolve 16.2. If I click this, done. It just fixed every single frame boundary on all the audio in my entire timeline. So if I'm about to go out to some of the other application, or I'm going to create an EDL, AAF, something like that, I now know that this is clean. It is on the boundaries. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't trim. If I turn off my link, doesn't mean I can no longer trim because I can. It's just basically fixing everything to that point. Now, the other option we have, because if you go to the Fairlight page, you'll notice that that's grayed out. That's an edit page thing. But if you're on the Fairlight page and you want all of your edits to definitely be on the frame boundaries, right, then what you can do is go up to your preferences, and inside your preferences, user preferences, editing, go down towards the bottom. You'll see there's a brand new one. It's a little hard to find, so I'm glad I showed it to you. And if I just click this one button, Align Audio Edits to Frame Boundaries, click that once, click Save, and it's done. Now watch what happens when I go to trim. No matter what I do, when I release, it's going to snap to a frame boundary. Same here. Okay, so that really prevents any issues. And this comes up a lot when you happen to be tweaking and getting in there and refining stuff. This way you know for sure you're on your frame boundaries. So that's kind of a nutshell. I mean, there's more. I know I left things out because I get excited and, you know, I can go on all day, you know me. But anyways, I'm just hoping that, this gave you a taste of some of what we can do inside of DaVinci Resolve 16.2 with Fairlight. Like I said, download it, try it out. It's pretty exciting stuff. And I think I can do questions now. Should I?
Yeah, we have, you can hear me, I hope.
I can hear you.
Unmuted myself. We have a few questions right now, and everybody, you have questions, put them in right now, because Mary's time is limited. She has to get back to her victory garden. So,
My what?
What? I don't know. Oh, yeah, let's get back to Russ. He says, I have different libraries. Can I name them, and how do I name them?
Okay, so how do you name your libraries? Great question. Well, all that happens over here in your, inside of your project manager. It's when you create your databases. Notice I happen to have a plethora of databases for who knows what I happen to be working on. But if you create a new database, let's say I just created this database, the thing is you just have to give it a name. You have to choose a location. Let's say I'm going to put this on my, one of the places I do it is, let's say, in my documents, whatever, but this is the name. Now, the trick with the naming convention at this level is that you can't use uppercase. It won't let you use uppercase, and you can put spaces in, though, using underlines, okay? So, for example, let's say I have an sound effects, it's just ambience. I have 1,000 ambient sounds. I could spell it. There we go. Ambient sound effects, and I'll probably put there. Ambient sound effects, and I have to tell it where do I want it to go. Documents, and I'll make a new folder. Now the folder I can name anything I want. And I'm doing caps on purpose just so you can tell which is which. So there it is, and that's all you do. When you make a database, you have to have an empty folder. When I click create, it is now made, or is making, a new database called ambient sound effects, theoretically. Come on, sound effects. And assuming this is going to work any second, there's no reason this wouldn't work, but it could be because it was saving. Okay, there we go. See, I have an ambient sound effect database. Now, I don't have to use this for editing, and I don't have to use this for projects. I recommend you use it only for your sound effects. I'm going to go back into my a different database because that's where I was before. I'll open this up so we can see this. And it doesn't matter where I am. If I go to my sound library, remember, as long as you click this button in the top of the sound library, you can now access any database, including the one I just made called ambient sound effects. There it is, right there. If I bring that up and choose that in my field, come on. There it is, ambient sound effects. Now you notice nothing is in here yet. So hopefully this solves the question. What do I do next? Well, I have my 4,000 ambient sounds that I've bought and I want to use them. All you do is click add library and point to wherever you're storing those. It does not put these into Resolve anywhere. It's just pointing to where they're located. And then if you don't need them anymore, like I said, you can just disconnect that database. Hopefully I answered that question.
Robert's got a question. Can you view, import, and use sound effects loops from Logic Pro 10?
View, import, and yeah, the file type. Yeah, that's a great question. The file, I can't remember the file format for the sound effects from Final Cut Pro 10. In general, if it plays on your computer, it's going to play in Resolve, but I have to check.
Okay.
It should, but it could be the tagging, or again the file extension. I have to see.
See, Brandon seems to have a little feedback. He says, personally, I'd like to access the Foley list via the UI instead of some hidden trick that you have typed in. Just add a small button is all you need. Looks like there is some nice improvements, though. Does that make any sense to you?
It does. It does. You know, I have a list. But,
let's go through Mary's list for the next 30 minutes.
So I guess what you're saying is you would like to have the list somewhere. Well, we'll have to see what we can do about maybe putting that into documentation. I'll tell you what, maybe I can add that to the Fairlight book. How's that?
Yeah, I think, Brandon, your other question, this seems to be more of a Final Cut question rather than a Resolve question. And if you want to retype it again and ask the attendees, if Bill Davis is still in the chat here, I'm sure he'll be able to answer it. Anybody else have any questions before Mary's got to leave? And
can I show one thing I forgot?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm feeling all this guilt because I'm like, oh man, I forgot something.
No.
The edit selections.
Go right ahead.
What happens when you're jamming through this massive thing? And I'm sure there's people going, wait, you didn't show the. You know, everything's important to somebody, right?
Okay.
So I've mentioned, I'm back to my edit selection tool. The one thing I didn't point out was the zoom, because if you right click and you go down to your track waveform zoom, we have all of these different ways to zoom in. And the difference is this is scalable zooming, so I can see what is that, or how much, especially if I'm looking for like room tone. And I found a little section, I'm like, what's happening here? Can I use this for room tone, or is there something going on underneath I can't see? I don't really want to crank up the volume of all my tracks, which is what most people do, is you blast out the volume to see it bigger like this, but then it sounds really loud and it's a little scary, right? So instead of doing that, what I can do is I've applied some shortcuts to that, but you can also use the right-click menu to do that. And so I have created some shortcuts. Shift Z will fit to the window, and Control Z is what I used to zoom in. Obviously, I've gone way crazy, but as scary as that looks, I didn't actually make them very loud, right? And then I have another shortcut to lower it. Now I'm doing all of them at once for this demo, but you can also do it based on selected track, and you also can set a shortcut to quickly reset them. So as you're in there monkeying around, you can go, wait, I want to see that bigger, and come back out. So that's kind of big. So any other questions?
Yeah, Brandon has one more question about round tripping with Resolve. Do subframe edits transfer with the Final Cut Pro XML? What you use to go back and forth?
That's a great question. I don't have that answer. I can look that one up. But I do think that one of the reasons why we use your subframe editing, but just go one direction or the other a tiny bit, and just go to the frame boundaries, and you'll still be okay. Because the frame boundaries are frames are awfully minuscule. So theoretically, you can do your subframe editing and fix things, but then you might be able to trim it in a hair one direction or the other to get to the frame boundary. So you can try it. I'm not certain the results. I know that there's people who've been going back and forth to Final Cut Pro 7 and 10 very successfully right out of Resolve without any issues, and I haven't heard a lot of frame boundary issues for that. It's more when they're going to AAF. So.
Nuno is asking about Pro Tools. Same question, only Pro Tools.
That's where I think you want to clean up your frame boundaries. So.
Okay.
So, but the one thing I will say about AAFs is I know that's a moving target. It's something that we've been adding features and functionality for that nonstop, and we have added so much more robust stability, not just stability, but just being able to bring in an AAF into an existing timeline, and all sorts of other elements. If you look at the feature list when you go to 16.2, you'll see some of those.
Pedro asks, when will we have VSTS work on Linux?
That's a great question too.
Hey Bob,
so yeah, I think. Well,
chime in.
Yeah, we'll take that offline. I think that's some of the. I think those are some of those requests that everybody's working on. So.
I believe if I've got the settings right, the chat is saved. It'll be sent to me, and I got all your emails, guys. And so if we don't answer any of the questions here, I will shoot them off to Mary, and she can find the answer, and we'll get it to you soon. We aim to please. I think. There's so many settings in Zoom. It's just nuts. Okay, so is that it, folks? Because I think we have to move on anyway. It's getting kind of late.
I think so. Yeah, Bob needs to turn.
Yeah,
He's been waiting
I know.
With his perfect bookcase.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mary. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. When we get back to normal.